All right. Welcome, everybody. My name is Julie Caldwell, and I'm one of the assistant directors here at the Accessibility Institute at Carleton University. And I have the great pleasure of overseeing some of the day-to-day operations from the National Office for the Canadian Accessibility Network. I'm speaking to you from today here from the National Office at Carleton University in Ottawa, Ontario. I think I've graduated to now having salt and pepper colored hair and brown eyes with glasses, and I'm a white settler. Today's panel is entitled Accessibility is a Leadership Competence, and we will discuss how accessibility goes beyond compliance and becomes a practice rooted in empathy, intentionality, and inclusion, including how leaders can create workplaces where everyone's contributions are valued and supported. So we're so excited you could join us. And for those who are just coming in now, if you are comfortable and would like to do so, please share where you're joining us from in the chat. I would like to make some space to acknowledge that as we gather virtually today, we recognize that we join this meeting from many traditional and ancestral territories of Indigenous nations. These lands are home to many diverse nations, Inuit and Métis communities, whose cultures, knowledge, and relationships continue to teach us. Being currently in Ottawa, I'm joining you from the unceded territory of the Algonquin Nation. A land acknowledgement is a living statement and one that evolves alongside our understanding and carries meaning each time it's shared. It's both a reflection and a commitment. And so I invite those of you, if you're interested, to look up the land that you reside on if you haven't already. And I believe we're going to put the link in the chat where you can do that, as we all share a responsibility as inhabitants to understand our relationship to the land and its people and histories. Before we officially jump into the panel, I do have just a few housekeeping items that I would like to address. The Canadian Accessibility Network is a national cross-sectoral collaboration, an initiative of the Accessibility Institute at Carleton University, working to advance accessibility for persons with disabilities across Canada. While we do endeavor to be a bilingual network, today's event will be delivered in English only. For those who prefer French, live digital translation is available, as well as ASL, and we have spotlighted our ASL interpreters to the screen, and they will take turns turning their cameras on and off as they present and share their language as well. Attendees who've requested ASL should have been given multi-pin privileges, and this lets you pin the interpreter videos to keep them visible. And we'll also spotlight the active interpreters throughout the event and speakers as well. If you don't have that access and you require it, please let us know in the chat and we'll make sure we get you what you need. We also have English captions available through Zoom. And to enable, you can click the arrow next to the CC button at the bottom of your screen. And full transcripts in English and French can be accessed through links that we'll post in the chat, and those open in a browser window. And if you have any challenges throughout the duration of our Can Connect forum today, please just put your comments in the chat and we will do everything we can to get it resolved for you as quickly as possible. All right. So what I would like to do now is actually welcome our moderator for the session, Katie Albrecht. And so Katie, I'm going to bring you to the screen and just give me one moment and then I'll ask you to introduce yourself and to get our session started. Trying to find Katie. Katie, are you there?
Great. Can you see me now?
I cannot see now. All right, my friends. Small technical difficulty. Got to find Katie. Oh, there she is. I found her. All right. Spotlight. There we go. All right, Katie, over to you.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Julie. It's just such a pleasure to be here today. So my name's Katie Albrecht. I am a settler of Eastern European and Scottish descent. My pronouns are she and her, and I'm joining you today, someone mid-aged with brown hair and brown eyes, wearing a red shirt, and I'm appearing against the backdrop of many books on a shelf. And so I'm joining you from St. Francis Xavier University, which is located in Antigonish, which is located on Mi'kma'ki, the ancestral and unceded territory of the Mi'kmaq people. And so I want to acknowledge and honor the Mi'kmaq as past, present, and future caretakers of the land and waters. And as we gather today to think about accessibility as leadership, I think we're invited, or I'd like to invite us to attune to accessibility, not only about inclusion, but as a form of world making. And so, in this sense, disability and difference are sources of knowledge and creativity that can transform how we work, live, and lead. I just want to share a few notes. We had Dino Zupa, the CEO from Accessibility Standards Canada, as one of our scheduled speakers. Unfortunately, he was unable to join us for the panel. So we are welcoming Megan Larocque, also from Accessibility Standards Canada, in his place. And I may just take a moment to welcome Megan and invite her to introduce herself.
Thank you for the introduction. I appreciate it. I'm really happy to be here, and I thank the organizers for bringing all this together. My name is Megan Lafeck. My pronouns are she, her, ou, elle. I have blue-green eyes. I'm wearing glasses. I have brown hair with some honorable mention grays, and I'm wearing a blue shirt. I appear against a backdrop of plants and a couch.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Megan. And I'd now like to welcome Maureen Hahn and invite Maureen to introduce herself.
Hi, everybody. My name is Maureen Hahn. I use she, her pronouns. I am also a white woman with shoulder length, I'm going to say light brown hair. And I'm joining you today from Ontario. I am the president and CEO of the Canadian Council on Rehabilitation and Work. I have spent many, many years here advancing equitable employment opportunities for folks with disabilities right across Canada. We'll get into it a little bit more later, I'm sure. I also sit as a board member on Accessibility Standards Canada, so I get the pleasure of working with Megan, and I also get the pleasure of watching the impact on policy results for inclusion in Canada. So, and you'll hear me talk about this as we go through. For me, it's all about how we design the environments, we make the decisions, we create the cultures where people are feeling valued and where they can bring their best work to the workspace. So really pleased to be part of the conversation. Thanks so much.
Excellent. Thanks, Maureen. And finally, I'd like to welcome Carly Fox and ask Carly to introduce themselves.
Hi, everyone. Great to see some of you again and to see some new faces. So my name is Carly Fox. My pronouns are she, her, elle, and I'm a disability rights advocate and master's student at Carleton's Institute of Political Economy. My career in the disability and accessibility sector to date has largely revolved around creating spaces for other disabled youth to get involved in the movement, to have a say in the decisions impacting them, and to share their own stories and perspectives. So when I was co-moderating a workshop with the incredible Rabia Ketter, she asked that instead of visual descriptions, we socially locate ourselves. So I wanted to act on that today instead. So I'm a queer, neurodivergent, and invisibly disabled white woman and settler currently on unceded and unsurrendered Algonquin Anishinaabe land. Band-Aid off, I'm 24 years old, so still technically a youth. I grew up in a working class family that lived paycheck to paycheck, and I'm a first generation university graduate. And for visuals anyways, I have long brown hair, and I did my makeup for this because you guys are worth the effort.
Great. Thank you, Carly. And we were to be joined by Senator Chantal Petitclerc today. Unfortunately, Senator was unable to join us in person, but she was very eager to contribute to this important conversation on leadership and has shared a video with her responses to the panel questions. We're going to start with the video. And before doing that, though, I would like to give a bit of a background on the senator for those of you who may not be aware. She's a celebrated Canadian Paralympian, a respected public speaker, and a tireless advocate for inclusion and accessibility. A companion of the Order of Canada and Knight of the Order of Quebec, she brings her lived experience, leadership, and national perspective to her work in the Senate and across Canada. So as I said, we'll start with this video and then we'll move into the more formal discussion.
All right, Katie, I'll just give you one moment to get things started.
Great, thank you.
Thank you so much for inviting me to be a part of this very important conversation. I think the first thing I would like to say is that accessibility can't stay in some sort of a box labeled disability issue. Of course, disability communities have to remain at the center of this work. That part should never be negotiable. Nothing about us without us. But if accessibility is seen only as something for disability organization to worry about, then we're not going to get the kind of changes that we need. I do think that because accessibility is really about leadership, it's about design, it's about human rights, it's about how we build our workplaces, our services, our public spaces, our schools, technology. It's everything, it's everything. And honestly, if something excludes people, then it was not designed well at the first place. It may be legal, it may be standard practice, it may be what we've always done, but that does not mean it's good enough. It doesn't mean it's right. In my own life as an athlete, as a senator, and simply as someone who lives with a disability, I have learned that one of the best ways to bring people along is to move that conversation away from guilt and towards responsibility. Because guilt usually shuts people down. People get defensive, they worry about saying the wrong thing, they think, oh, okay, this is going to be complicated. But responsibility is different. This is what it's all about. Responsibility says this is part of your job. This is part of our job. This is part of good leadership. It's part of doing things properly. And this is the goal. I also think that we have to move from compliance to ambition. Compliance is not enough. A lot of people still approach accessibility with some sort of a checklist in mind. They ask, what do we have to do? What are the minimum requirements? What do we need to do to avoid problems? And yes, of course, standards and regulation matter. They matter a lot. In fact, they are the base. But if we stop at the minimum, we miss the whole point and we miss opportunities. So the question should not only be, are we compliant? The better question really is, who are we still excluding and what do we need to do? And then the next question is, what are we really prepared to change and to do better? This is where leadership really begins. One thing I try to do is make accessibility very, very real for people. It's not theory, it's not abstract, it's real people living real life, because accessibility is about whether someone can be included, someone can get a job, they can get into a building, whether they can go to school, use public transportation. attend an event, go to a restaurant, healthcare, play, sport, travel, vote, just taking part of every aspect of daily life. And when you talk about it this way, it becomes so much harder for leaders to say, this is really not our issue, because it is our issue. It's everyone's issue. And also, when we have to remember that disability is not marginal, it's part of the human experience. Some people are born with disability, some acquire disability, some will acquire disability, some have temporary disability, episodic, invisible, age-related disability. So it's everybody at one point or another. And so when we design with accessibility in mind as a mindset, we don't design for a small group of people. We're designing for all of us at different moments of our lives. And we ask about models that can help build curiosity around disability and accessibility across all sectors. I think this is the most important thing, is accessibility. It needs to be universal. And universal design challenge that idea, that accessibility that we add at the end. It says, let's think about it right from the beginning. Let's not build something and then realize later that a whole group of people cannot use it. Another model I think is very important is co-design. Co-design is crucial. And by co-design, I mean bringing people with disability on the table into the process right at the beginning, not at the end when everything is basically designed, not just to rubber stamp a plan, but right at the beginning when the questions are being framed, when the priorities are being set, when the budget is shaped. Too often, people consult too late, and then what happens, of course, is this accessibility becomes a problem to fix instead of a value added right from the beginning. Also, I think that leaders can build a curiosity just by asking questions. Question like, okay, so who's not in the room? Who cannot access this service? Who might be affected by this decision in ways that we have not considered yet? What barriers are we creating without sometimes realizing it? And who has the lived experience we need to actually get it right, and how do we get them at the table? Those are very simple questions, but they really can change the conversation over time, and they build a culture where accessibility is not a special topic. It becomes part of how all decisions are being made. So if we are giving advice to someone starting out in accessibility leadership, I would probably go there and I would say a few things. First, stay close to lived experience. That's crucial. Two, priority matters, data matters, research matter, but lived experience, it just shows where the system is actually working, where it's failing. It tells the difference between what an organization think it's doing and what people are actually experiencing. And then second, don't settle for just some sort of symbolic inclusion. It's not enough to invite people with disabilities into the room if the room is not accessible. It's not enough to say we care about inclusion if the same people still hold the decision-making power. Real inclusion means influence. It means people with disability are helping to set the agenda. They are shaping the priority. They are part of the decision at every step. And that's important. That's crucial. And then we have to be persistent, because accessibility leadership, it can be uncomfortable. We all have to repeat ourselves. We have to challenge assumption. We keep hearing things like, oh, we never thought of that. That sounds complicated. Maybe we can look at it next year. And sometimes we have to just clearly and kindly but firmly say, no, this cannot wait. Because every delay has a cost. Every non-accessible system exclude people in real life, in real time. So in practical approaches, in terms of that, we need to mainstream that knowledge. Everybody needs to know. We need to communicate. It should not be some sort of a specialized knowledge that one person in an organization, executive needs it, board member, public servant, the team, urban planner, educator, event organizer. So all of them, they need to have a basic level of accessibility competency. And accountability, of course, is so important. Goodwill is nice, but it's not a strategy. We need the standards, the timeline, the resources, and we need reporting. We need to learn. And yes, we need consequences sometimes when organizations do not follow through. But we also have to support the people and the organization to get there. It's a teamwork. Some organization, especially the smaller one, they may want to do better, but they genuinely don't know where to start. So we need those practical tools and training, shared expertise, and sometimes funding. That's important as well. Another practical lever is, I believe, it's procurement. Government and large institution, they spend a lot of money buying services and technology infrastructure and expertise, and accessibility should be built around those decisions from the start. If public money is being spent, accessibility should never be optional. And finally, I think that we need to value disability leadership itself. People with disability are not just service user. We are leader. We have to be leader, innovator. We have to involve ourselves as expert, as artists, as parents. You know, we have to keep pushing those doors open. Canada, it has leadership when it comes to disability, but it's under-recognized, under-resourced. So if we want stronger accessibility leadership, we need more disabled people at the leadership role. We need organization to remove the barriers that are still making it harder than it should to get involved. So for me, the goal is not just to have a more accessible Canada on paper. The goal should be a Canada where accessibility is seen as excellence, where inclusion is not treated as a favor, where leaders have the courage to ask, who are we leaving out? And then the discipline to actually change the system that are doing the exclusion and the excluding. So this is the work ahead. It's a lot of work, and in my view, it's not optional. It's fundamental to the kind of country that we say we want to be, and this should never be an option, because we cannot afford to leave people behind. So thank you so much for having me via this video, and thank you for everything that you do. I am so grateful for every time we take a moment to have that conversation on why accessibility matters, and why when we choose to include, everybody wins.
Excellent. So thank you, there was so much there. I think the opportunity to learn from the senator, and I think really learn from lived experience is core to understanding leadership as a competency. And so there's a few things that I really loved about what was shared. I think the statement that accessibility is real people living real lives is so important, and something exemplified in bringing social location into our understanding. So thank you, Carly and Rabia, for that invitation. And so I think we are ready to get started on our first discussion question. And I'm glad to have all of these leaders in the room. So the first question is, we know the world is busy, and leaders often find themselves focused on issues within their sector. When their sector is not disability specific, it can be challenging then to try to encourage other leaders to take an active role in issues that influence their sector that are also disability priorities. So, in your leadership role, how have you inspired others to ensure disability, accessibility, and inclusion are at the top of their priority? And perhaps we could start with Maureen.
Great. Thank you so much. So I think that the senator said so much of what we're all going to say, and so that's actually pretty good because we can really emphasize uh, some commonalities. But for me, I think that the one of the biggest shifts that we need to make is to help leaders understand that accessibility isn't separate from their business priorities, and in many cases, it is the priority that will drive better outcomes across the business or the organization. I've found the most effective way to engage leaders that are outside the disability space is to link accessibility issues or inclusion issues to what they've already focused on, like talent shortages, employee engagement, overall productivity. Um, because when inclusion is positioned as a solution to these challenges, it really becomes immediately much, much more relevant to and meaningful to their work. We also try to make sure that we bring evidence and lived experience. We've heard a lot about lived experience already into the conversation with data that's collected through our research department as well as community research that demonstrates that inclusive hiring alongside with real stories really does make business sense. I was in a course recently where they said DEI, it's been proven that DEI makes absolutely no impact on the bottom line. And I've thought about that for a really long time since that moment. And even if it hasn't made an impact on the bottom line for research, which is in the past, it is making a difference on the bottom line now. We hear the stories. We know that when barriers are removed and businesses succeed, they do it in a way that is innovative, that is cutting edge. I think that making sure that when we're talking about breaking down accessibility into really concrete, achievable steps, right? So that businesses feel that they're empowered to start, even when they don't have everything figured out. I think that the senator said that as well, right? It doesn't have to be perfect, but we have to start moving. Because ultimately, really, it's about reframing accessibility as a core leadership competency and making sure that our leaders are actually evaluated on that competency. Because when you design for inclusion, we know that you create just better outcomes for everybody.
Excellent. Thank you, Maureen, and thanks also for bringing research into the conversation. So, speaking about social location and locations, a location I didn't share at the beginning is that I do work through the Spatializing Care Intersectional Disability Studies Lab and the Center on Aging and Disability Justice at St. Francis Xavier University. And one of the things that we've really had attention to is the importance of having researchers with lived experience be at the table. And certainly we have to be thinking about the kinds of evidence that we have access to as a current and mobilizing that so that people can act on it. So much there that you've shared that's important. I wonder if perhaps Megan, you'd like to offer some perspective.
Absolutely. And I think what I'm going to share is only going to build on what Senator and Maureen have shared already. And I think the biggest thing for us is we know that accessibility will become a priority when leaders understand it impacts everyone. It's not a niche issue. And so if I can add numbers to what has already been shared, we know that 27% of Canadians live with a disability, and that 64% of Canadians live with or care for someone with a disability. So those are your new talent as an employer. Those are your customers or clients as a business. So, and as Senator had outlined, accessibility impacts everyone. At some point in our lives, we will all be a person with disabilities. We will all, at some point, encounter barriers, whether that's temporary, permanent, visible, or invisible as we age, as we support a family or friend. And there's massive economic growth when it comes to accessibility. We have a report that has demonstrated that persons with disabilities represent $2.6 trillion in spending power across major economies, and it jumps to $18.3 trillion with families and friends. Because when a person with disability goes out to dinner, they're going out to dinner with their family and friends. Everyone around the table is participating in that dinner. And so we're seeing, for example, cruise lines taking advantage of that economic growth. They see the value of accessibility because they know that when a person with disability travels, they're traveling with their friends and family, and they want to travel in a way that is accessible and removes barriers. So accessibility, it's not just good social policy, it's also smart economic strategy. And one thing I think that we could share from Accessibility Standards Canada is we love to model accessibility through tours of our office. So when interested parties come for a visit, come for a meeting, we start with a tour and we show them physically what accessibility in a space can look like. And that hooks people because it's practical. It's something that they can remember and take away with them and visually see that it's completely possible to make a physically accessible space for everyone. So when leaders embed accessibility and inclusion into everyday decisions, it creates better outcomes for people, organizations, and society as a whole.
That's great, Megan. Thank you. The statistics are interesting. I think you mentioned 24% of Canadians. I know here in Nova Scotia or Mi'kma'ki, it's closer to 40%. So really important that leadership and leaders are taking accessibility into consideration, regardless of what sector they may be located in. And also wonderful guidance, I think, just to imagine the power of a tour as part of that, I think, leadership education and training that could happen. Certainly there's the visual aspect, but also the tactile and the wayfinding. How is it that you move through space? How do you get into spaces? And then once you're in that space, what are you in for? Thank you, Megan, for what you've shared. Carly, any thoughts?
Hopefully a few. No, I'm kidding. Just to respond directly to the prompt, we know that the world is busy and leaders are stretched so thin, but I think that's exactly why accessibility needs to be a leadership priority, right? Preaching to the choir. But if you do the bare minimum with accessibility, following legal requirements, not openly discriminating against anyone, it's going to feel like an obligation and one you don't have time for. But I think if you actually embrace accessibility as this motor of innovative systems change for this new economy, for this new workforce, for a new world, you're going to see a return on your investment right away. And we know that current ways of working are not working. And by challenging how we design the built environment, how we communicate with others, and how we design policy, I think accessibility really can be this almost North Star that so many leaders are searching for as they weather this unprecedented era and its many challenges. To speak to my personal experience in ensuring leaders understand accessibility and disability inclusion as a priority, I have it so easy. I'm going to be honest. Because as a public speaker and as a consultant, I'm only brought in when people care, right? It's my job to take that initial goodwill and curiosity and then help organizations from Hyundai Canada to the British High Commission move from sympathy to empathy to solidarity to help them navigate the basics and then, more importantly, give them the tools, resources, and confidence they need to keep learning and growing once I'm gone. Finally, when it comes to those leaders who just don't get it yet, I hate to say it, but I keep telling myself you can bring a horse to water, you cannot make it drink. You can make organizations, like the senator said, follow those regulations, but you can't always make them care. But to go back to the metaphor, apologies, some horses are chugging that water. And the organizations and leaders that are embracing accessibility, they're already showing how transformative it can be. So I really take solace in knowing there's like this accessibility leadership snowball that it just keeps rolling and growing, and you're either going to get behind it or you're going to get swept up in it. I'll stop now before I add another metaphor.
Okay, that's great. Thanks, Carly. And I love how you've described and imagined it almost as, I think the words you used are the motor of system change. That's great, but it's really about shifting the culture too, and that accessibility can help us navigate these significant paradigm shifts that are happening. And so thank you for that. This is great. Perhaps what we can do now is move on to the next question. We have 4 questions in total, so that'll take us about halfway through, and then we'll have time for questions from everyone who's been joining us today. Our second question is, have you encountered models that may help develop curiosity in disability and accessibility issues across sectors? And with that, perhaps we'll start with Megan.
I think that we've already chatted about how accessibility is connected to every sector, right? Not just disability-focused organizations. And for us, we try to focus then on gathering industry and other players that support their implementation of accessibility standards and other initiatives. So for example, right now, our CEO is speaking to a room full of architects and builders and city planners, all from different industries and areas, not necessarily focused on accessibility, but he's presenting our accessible ready housing standard to them. And we've found that the greatest impact comes from focusing on the lived experience and practical solutions. When people understand how barriers affect real individuals in real life situations, accessibility becomes more relatable and relevant. So we share evidence, research, and best practices to move the conversation away from theory and actually into action. What can they do? What action can they take to be more accessible and remove barriers? And when people are more curious when they see practical solutions and measurable impacts. And so we've taken that concept and we've applied it to our standards. You're now going to see moving forward images being applied into our standards. So our accessible ready housing standard, our outdoor spaces standards will show visual representations of what, for example, a standard bathroom and an accessible ready bathroom looks like. So someone can compare and contrast what that looks like visually. An outdoor space, what does an accessible swim access look like? We'll show images of this. And by having that accessible by design model in and of itself that creates that curiosity because people are thinking about accessibility from the beginning and not as an afterthought. And it transforms the idea from away from all are welcome more to this space was built with you in mind. It's less reactive, it's more proactive, and the responsibility is on the individuals providing the space and not on the individuals accessing the space to raise their concerns. So I think the biggest piece of curiosity grows when accessibility is presented as a feasible shared opportunity with practical solutions, one that improves outcomes across every sector.
That's great, Megan. Thank you. And it's interesting to think about how um, the model that you've shared, where you're, providing information, descriptions, visuals, lots of different ways of knowing what an accessible space could be. So whether it's a washroom or something else, how that is doing accessibility in a sense, because it's assuming that not everyone has that image in mind. And so we can start together on the same page. Maureen, what are your thoughts?
Great, thank you. Really great points, Megan. Thank you for starting us off there. I redid my notes as you were talking because I was like, okay, you've said that. I'll say something new here. But I think that the biggest thing for me to give advice to somebody who's just starting out is take action. It doesn't have to be perfect. You don't need to have everything figured out to begin. Get those small steps in, build momentum, demonstrate leadership and practice, feel good with the start, right? That not that you're not doing I don't want to say the disability advocates in the room know what I want to say here, but I don't want to say it in mixed company. So, but like, it's not about you feeling better because, oh, you're helping out the poor little crip that's down the hall, right? That's not what this is about, but feel good for the strides that you're making and appreciate those when you're actually treating people as people. I think that the other big thing for me is focusing on the systems, not just the accommodations. We talk a lot about accommodations, but I think thinking about how the policies, the processes, the environments, how they can all be designed really inclusively from the start and making that lasting impact. And like the senator said, right, make the full area inclusive, and then you'll have time then to make those individual adjustments or accommodations when needed on a personal level. So, like when I see there is a private quiet room in an office, I know I don't have to ask for that, right? I know I don't have to say, excuse me, is there a place that I can go for a quiet moment? No, I know that there's one there. I've seen it. It's there for me. Um, and so then that takes the burden off of me. I have more choices then to be able to make because I haven't had to navigate into that space. So I can bring even a better part of myself into the workforce, right? Like I'm not burdened with with the small things about making sure that I can bring my best self to work. I just bring my best self to work, right? And so um, and workplaces uh, do have to adjust, right? I think that that's another thing that I would say that workplaces must adjust. I was on a panel last week, actually, and I've never sat on a panel with a lawyer, but I've often said this. And I turned to the lawyer and I said, am I right on this? And he said, yes, you are. That if it's only up to the person with a disability to change and shift, it's the definition of discrimination. Workplaces have to change. Workplaces have to look and see what it is that they need to set up for their workers, or it's discrimination. Um, and lastly, you're going to hear this 20 million times today. It's so important to listen to lived experience and not just consult. It's engagement. It's taking the time to learn directly from people with disabilities. We have a saying here at CCRW that most employers are afraid of disability because they don't know anybody or they think they don't know anybody with a disability. And so making sure that that strong accessibility leadership is grounded in those real experiences is really very important as well, and not just have it based on assumptions.
Thank you, Maureen.
Thanks, Katie.
It's I love the example that you provided of the quiet room in the office. And like, it's hard to be curious when, as a worker or a leader or whomever, you're having to kind of imagine and plot out your next move, because you're not sure what's there. So, is it a safe space? Is it a space where you can get your work done when you don't have to worry about that? You can be curious. And I think that there was also real wisdom in encouraging not just consultation, but engagement and also relationship. There's a temporal dimension, so sustaining relationship over time. Carly, have you encountered any models that may help develop curiosity? And do you have any advice to someone who might be starting out in a leadership role, specifically in accessibility, about how you could think about and desire disability, difference, and accessibility across sectors?
Katie, forgive me. Do you want me to mash the second and third question together?
Yes, yeah.
Got you. Okay. You guys are stuck with me for a little bit longer. No, I love how this question, the first one, really emphasizes curiosity because I think it's such an important and respectful place to start learning and unlearning. So, on the topic of learning and unlearning, we have to talk about model exhaustion because you've heard about the social model, the medical model, maybe the biopsychosocial model, and it gets overwhelming because when you get caught up with one model, another one seems to come along and challenge it. And if you aren't completely immersed in the sector, and even if you are, it can be discouraging and overwhelming. But I want to emphasize that the model issue is not unique to disability. Every field has its own way of understanding issues and offering solutions. So, thinking about models, I think of it like a buffet. Just take what interests you. And it also makes me think of good art. You don't have to agree with it, but you should stop and consider it, right? All of this to say is that no model is ever going to be perfectly comprehensive and universally accepted. But I do have my favorites. So, of all places, mine comes from development economics, which is the capabilities approach invented by, and I'll slow down for this one, Amartya Sen and Martha Nussbaum. Lovely. So the capabilities approach really explores how our individual capabilities and the opportunities available to us shape and constrain our functionings, which is what we're able to actually go out and do. It already sounds familiar, right? It's going to get nerdy. So the approach explores what shapes our capabilities themselves, whether it's the surrounding environment, your personal resources, your social networks, and embedded in this model is physical and or mental ability. And this helps us explain why two people with the same kind of disability might have incredibly different life outcomes. And of course, it also emphasizes available opportunities, such as the opportunity to get a quality education or a decent job. But what makes it so special to me is its emphasis on human agency. It doesn't define what an individual should pursue or what opportunities should be prioritized or even what optimal capability might look like. Instead, it measures success by the ability of an individual to pursue the opportunities they find meaningful to them. And this concept, known as human flourishing, is so refreshing because us disabled people are so often told what to do, how to act, how to behave, and our own aspirations and dreams are hardly ever considered. So, moving on to the next question, I believe, on accessibility leadership advice. I'm getting the go ahead. Oh, you poor things. To be so candid, if I had to give someone advice right off the bat, I would tell them to work on their coping mechanisms and stress management. And I know the senators already talked about it, but I also might just be projecting right now. There's just so much work to do and so many people to impact through leadership. And I think that makes it both exciting and also just incredibly daunting. And I think as we try to get more people on board, we don't want to scare them off. But I also think we need to start being more open about how emotional and personal and like exhausting this can be. especially if we want to ensure leadership is transparent and sustainable and supported. With that said, the first piece of advice I'd actually give is just to be kind to yourself and to keep learning. There's no one way to think about disability, and our understandings are changing every day. Exciting, exhausting. So, if we want to keep up with evolving knowledge, we have to start by showing ourselves and others patience. Because you can't learn and grow if you're always beating yourself up. And the senator already talked about it, but when people are too afraid to even talk about disability, they're never going to try. And one saying that really stuck with me in my childhood, which I know was a little bit more recent for me than others, it's better to make a loud wrong than a quiet right. If we don't give people the space and compassion to get it wrong, but with the right heart, we're never going to get very far. Finally, the other piece of advice I'd share is to lead from the heart and to lead from lived experience. I sound like a broken record. This event's going to be fun. But if you don't have lived experience, learn from it with humility and allyship. Something really exciting is that we're seeing more leaders than ever begin to self disclose disability, and more openly disabled people finally get those leadership opportunities they've always deserved. Because representation isn't just about one person's experience, it's about creating those environments where everyone feels comfortable to show up as themselves. And for those accessibility leaders who aren't disabled, I'd really recommend leading through an allyship mindset, one where you use your position and your privilege to create more opportunities for disabled people. Whether you're disabled or not yet, leading with curiosity, empathy, and allyship, and taking a genuine interest in the people around you and the people you impact, as well as just always checking your ego at the door, is a pretty good place to start.
Great advice. Leading with and from the heart and humility, and amplifying the accessibility work that's already happening, and learning with and alongside it is so key. And I love the advice to also maybe slow down and don't feel that you have to do everything at once, that can be overwhelming. And we did hear a bit of that in the senator's video as well. Like, break it down into manageable chunks, as they would say, or just start somewhere. Megan.
Yeah, and I feel like I can build so much on what Carly and Maureen have shared about this, and I appreciate being the last person to answer this because I had so much advice going in that you've all tackled already. Particularly, Carly, what you were sharing about, the accidental mistakes and that environment. I think that in general, when it comes to DEI and accessibility inclusion, there's a fear of making a mistake because everyone's coming from a really good place and no one wants to cause harm, even unintended harm. And I would say this fear is amplified in accessibility focused organizations or work or projects because those individuals know the impact of harm even more so. And so establishing a culture where there's safety to make mistakes and grow, there's safety for repair, and removing that need for perfection can go a really long way when it comes to advancing conversations when it comes for accessibility and inclusion. And when it comes to what we've heard about from the senator and Maureen about how small steps can have really big impacts, sometimes it can be really overwhelming as a leader thinking about all the to-do lists, everything that needs to get done and where to start. And even at an organizational level, it can be very overwhelming when seeking to lead that change. And for us, one of the practical small steps that we encourage is to make all of your documents accessible. If you can run that accessibility checker and ensure everything you're providing is accessible, you'll notice a big difference. And I'll pull from our ICT standard. So this standard was based off of Europe's standard, but we provide it in Canada for free. We make sure it's accessible. We ensure that it's not a PDF, but it's a Word document and an HTML on the website. We provide plain language summaries. We translate it in English, French, ASL, and LSQ. All of these things we have seen individuals from Europe are coming to Canada's website to download our standard because our standard is accessible and is available in an accessible format that isn't available in Europe, even though the standards complement each other and build on the same information. People are coming to Canada and our website for that. And that's such a small little change that you can do, but will have such a big impact. So when we start listening, we learn, we lead by example, we find that inclusion is becomes built into everyday decisions from the beginning.
That's great. Thanks, Megan. I love the call to think about, the importance of the small things, making our documents accessible, adding alt text to images. I think it can seem difficult sometimes. Maybe we start off strong, but in that busy world that we described at the beginning, sometimes it can fall to the wayside. So just that persistence and kind of getting back on it is also important. And I'm thinking about, also using a mic in meetings. It can be really difficult, surprisingly, to have people use the mic or even, use it after you ask them to use the mic. And so as you were talking, Megan, I was reminded of, those moments when other people backed me up. When you become the lone voice of use the mic, it can feel lonely. And so, being a friend and an ally to amplify those moments or those practices can be one of those small changes with big impact. So thank you. So we're on the fourth and final question for our panelists today. And then, as I said, we can open up the discussion and Julie can lead us through that. So this question is, what are practical approaches that we can take to strengthen accessibility leadership capacity in Canada? And we could start with Carly, maybe.
Okay, so I am such a sucker for practicality, so thank you for wrapping on such an important question. I'll wrap up with three recommendations. So, one is to give us something to strive for. Humans don't work for the sake of working, we work towards specific goals and dreams and aspirations. So, invest early in setting up high level disability or accessibility specific positions in your organization, and then make sure they're enshrined in your bylaws and funding packages. When we know these roles exist, we know what we want to work towards, and we know what we need to pursue it. So give us something to strive for, but also let us strive. Too many disabled people are denied the chance to struggle, to push, to challenge themselves, and to grow the way that non-disabled people are. So let us take on responsibility in the workplace. Let us lead projects. Let us develop our own accessibility leadership potential, and don't assume what is or isn't too much for us. Two is to push the envelope and encourage new ideas. As a sector, we can't stay safe with what feels acceptable and practical to a non-disabled audience. We have to keep going, to think bigger, and to challenge the heart of inaccessible systems. And we need leaders that champion innovative, even utopian thinking, because we know the barriers and we know the challenges, and sometimes we even know the solutions. But how many of us can actually imagine a truly barrier-free and inclusive society? How many of us have actually sit down and tried? Leadership isn't just about navigating through challenges, it's about dreaming up a better world and then realizing it. And then finally, nothing about us without us ever. And I'll spell it out further. Nothing about us disabled people without us disabled people. If we want to invest in genuine, practical, meaningful accessibility leadership, we need to ensure it's led by the most impacted always. Don't get me wrong, there is space for everybody in this sector. We're going to need everybody. But accessibility leadership, like the senator said, can never come at the cost of disabled people themselves. We're perfectly capable of speaking and advocating for ourselves. All we need is allyship and solidarity. And you can do this by ensuring your funding is going to by and for disability organizations and prioritizing partnerships with grassroots community groups. We're here and we're ready and we're capable, and we're more than willing to work with like-minded people on issues we all care so deeply about. It's really just a matter of society finally giving us the chance to do so.
Great. Thank you, Carly. Maureen.
So I'm going to pick up on a couple of things. I'm picking up first on Carly speaking about allyship, because I think that when we're talking about allyship, we have to also understand where storytelling comes in. And when leaders hear directly from folks with disabilities, um, and it makes accessibility real and shifts perspective very, very quickly. And then it's about the holding the space, and then it's about giving up that space. So that, if there is a bridge that's needed into leadership, it's fine. Hold that space for now, but be ready to give it up. I think that there needs to be cross sector collaboration when we're talking about leaderships. I know that at CCRW we do leadership training all the time. We don't do it for CCRW. We do it for the community. We make sure that our leaders are cross-trained right across disability. Most of them are disabled leaders themselves, but they are not. It's not just about employment, right? It's about what's important in the disability community right now, what's going on right now. How do we tackle this? And so I think that understanding that cross-sector collaboration is so very, very important. And Carly, you also said about human flourishing. I love that. I'm going to use that all the time now. Instead of, it's like so boring to hear about belonging. No offense to anybody who's done that, right? But belonging, or talking about, it's a bit like it's a bit lesser than, right? Oh, you belong. No, yeah, right, I belong. So it's about human flourishing, and I love that. I'm going to use that all the time. But I also want to pick up on just two more things. I'm going way off notes right now. But Megan, you had talked about making all of your documents accessible. I want to talk about how that changes leadership in employment. So we worked with this one company in Winnipeg. I'll make it short, I promise. Doug was the owner of the company. They made pallets, wooden pallets for construction. And he hired this guy, Reed. And Reed couldn't understand the manual as it was given to him. Was it Reed's fault? Was it Doug's fault? Who knows? Who cares? It doesn't matter, because Doug went right and he changed the entire manual and he reedified it, right? Like he put Reed in the top of his mind and he just made the entire document so that he knew that Reed could understand it. And guess what happened? We all know what happened. His entire workforce did better. Doug's entire workforce was able to understand what he finally meant by, showing up on time, or making sure you wear this boots, or why you wear this, or why you do that. And so that type of, and what do you think that did for Reed? Right? What that did for Reed was it gave Reed a sense of accomplishment. It gave Reed a sense of knowing that he was innovative in his thoughts and how he thought about things, and that teaching could be spread out. So, like as simple as making all of your docs accessible is about leadership in the community, right? It's about making sure that people see themselves as leaders within their community. And one last thing, Katie, I'm the one in the room who is always saying it doesn't matter how loud you yell, you
Good.
need the friggin' mic, because the captionist can't pick up from your yelling. The captionist is not in this room. They're in a different country or in a different province, whatever it is. Use the mic. But I will tell you, that's the braveness, and that's what I think a practical approach to ensuring actual capacity for leadership is waiting, is stopping, is holding that space. I can't tell you how many meetings I've been at where me and other leaders, we will say, well, we're just going to wait. And we wait in silence. So many other meetings I go to where somebody says, well, while we're waiting for the captionist to start, we're just going to go ahead and tell you about lunch. Really? Because the deaf and hard of hearing person in the room doesn't need to know about lunch? So I'm not saying that because, oh, aren't we great? I'm saying that because we have to make sure everybody's on equal footing. And if the people who are in leadership are making sure that other people who are in the room are on equal footing, or even just have just a little bit of more of a head start, that's when we're going to see real leadership happen within Canada. And I don't even know what my notes said. So thank you very much for letting me go off script.
No, that's excellent. And like, what a great example too of like holding space. There's that humility that's there, but there's also like, it's just common sense. Like, you're not actually together if you're already to the next thing, if you're already kind of imagining and projecting to the next thing, and holding space, that's part of the gift of disability and difference. I think is just that it can slow us down. It does something in some moments, but slow in the sense of we're moving too quickly and we're not present where we are, and that's really critical to good leadership, to be present and part of relationships, so you're actually learning with and from, towards innovation, excellence, etc. So Megan, your thoughts?
I think that this is going to be my best attempt at just being as direct as possible. And you've heard it so many times that hire persons with disabilities, consult persons with disabilities, fund persons with disabilities, and involve them. And the best advice I can give to get there is to use our standards and our technical guides. They're intended to provide leaders with best practices and practical approaches. And I'll end with a highlight of our employment standards, simply because of the topic and the interest for folks in the room. There's something in our a concept in our employment standard called our disability confidence. And it gives you an opportunity to evaluate your organization's disability confidence, their confidence in leading by example, in championing inclusion, and managing a workforce that includes persons with disabilities. Because before we can do the necessary work to identify and remove barriers, we need to ensure that organizations are ready to lead and champion this work. And our employment cycle is meant to give you practical steps at every stage of a life of an employee's employee experience or employment life cycle. So whether you're at recruitment, you're doing a job posting, you're accepting applications, interviewing, hiring, onboarding, throughout the entire ongoing employment, career development, we break it down into those different stages of employment. So that's in all those different stages, you're given practical steps to ensure accessibility is included at all of them. And if you want to know about the different standards and technical guides that we have upcoming or we already have, sign up for our newsletter, follow us on social media, and join in on our public reviews, because we want to hear from you. What in our standards, our draft standards, aren't working, could be improved upon. That's where we rely on folks' feedback at the public review stage. So please get involved with our work, because we'd love to see and hear how you're implementing our standards and our technical guides.
That's excellent. Thank you, Megan. So many rich resources through all of the various organizations that are represented here in the room. I think with that, I just want to thank all of the panelists and the Canadian Accessibility Network for the opportunity to be here today. And I will pass the mic over to Julie to take us through the discussion.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you, Katie. And thank you to each of our panelists. Please don't go away yet. We haven't had any official questions in the chat. Oh, just give me 1 second. Zelda has put something in here right now, so I will read it as well. A future question about accessibility leadership beyond formal accommodation systems, especially in decentralized student life settings like student societies, clubs, and student-led groups. At universities, many engagement opportunities are announced close to the event date. That can unintentionally make participation depend on who already has flexibility, insider awareness, transportation, money, energy, and capacity at exactly the right moment. How can institutions help student groups shift toward a more proactive quotes, runway model, such as term-based calendars, earlier notice, and clearer planning norms. So participation is more equitable for the general student population, including but not limited to disabled students. And any resources or references in this area would be appreciated. So would anybody feel comfortable speaking to that?
The
Carly?
disabled student, sorry, I had to.
Yeah.
For reference, for context, I did work acronym for the National Educational Association of Disabled Students for
Yeah.
like 4 years, love them to death. And we got to do this incredible tour across Canada. That's how I met Katie over there, meeting disabled students, asking what they're experiencing. And I want to be no, I won't choose my words. We need to hold universities accountable because these barriers often, I'm going to say it, they're not oversights, they're often explicit because they don't want to engage, because they don't want to hear, because they have a profit model and they treat us like revenue streams. They don't want to spend any money, they don't want to make changes to their systems. And I really think that does stem from a lack of accountability. And I could give something more constructive, but I think it's a lot more honest to the feedback we receive from disabled students across Canada. There's such an animosity and a resistance to accommodating. And I think because they're often provincial accessibility standards, varying between provinces, we've seen a lot of it stems from the provincial culture as well. So I wish I had a better answer in this moment, but I do want you to know disabled students feel this across Canada, so you are not alone. And it's a really insightful question.
Thank you, Carly. Maureen?
I'd love to just add to that because I think that Carly, you nailed it. You just nailed it absolutely from the disabled student perspective, as you would, but as of course you would. But I also want to bring in the employer perspective because what we find at CCRW is that students graduate and they haven't they don't have the knowledge. And I speak about this firsthand. I've got two children who have gone through the university system both with disabilities, both graduating thinking that they can only get a job that allows them more time to do an assignment, or that they need to. And I don't disagree. Like absolutely, they needed more time to do an assignment because they were in school, and the goal in school is to learn, bring down all the barriers to learning. Absolutely. That doesn't apply to the workplace. The workplace, you're making a widget. If you're making a widget, do you need more time? Is the employer actually going to give you time? Wouldn't it be better for universities to work together, and to your point, Carly, to actually work together into that transition out of university into the workforce and having appropriate expectations of what accommodations they need in the workforce? I swear that is our biggest. I'm pointing to my door and I'm thinking about all my team behind that door that are working with students right now. And one of the biggest things that they do is they debunk the myths that these students must have these accommodations because
Yes.
and the students are holding on, or the graduates are holding on to those accommodations as a crutch. No, I need it. I need it. I need it. No, you don't. No, you don't. You don't need it for this situation. You're good. You're good. We got you. We're going to figure out something else. And I think that making sure that we've got that in our systems is so very, very important.
I love that, Maureen. Doing a hand raise to that one. Katie, and just before Katie, you speak, I wanted to verbally say if anybody does have questions, feel free to raise your either virtual hand or literal hand. I'm keeping an eye on the screen, or if it's easier and more comfortable, feel free to put your comment or question in the chat and we'll make sure we get to you. Katie.
Great. Thank you, Julie. And thanks, Carly and Maureen. I'd like to just pick up on, I think, what you both shared, but also, especially Maureen, thinking with the worker perspective and the disabled worker within the post-secondary setting. And so very often, events, resources, and activities are become the responsibility and are championed and are celebrated by faculty and staff who have lived experience of disability within rural institutional settings where there can be resource scarcity and people may be, working precariously. And we do know there's quite a lot of research and evidence to support that that faculty, especially with disabilities, are often in more precarious positions within institutions, don't have that security necessarily of a tenured position. But so we'll have these working people with lived experience that are taking up this work, and may not always have the support that's there to be able to build in that regularity and that consistency. There's that expression working off the side of your desk, and not as an excuse, but so often most of us are kind of positioned at the edges of our desks, trying to hold on not only to the desk but that space to make sure that there's still something. And so what I'd like to offer up, I think, in contribution with what has already been shared, is how can we think about, again, with Maureen, how to work across institutions, how to work across like faculties or departments or sectors, especially maybe within the public sector. So with like local libraries or municipalities, to kind of share the load so that it doesn't fall on one or a few individuals, which has lots of implications for being able to carry the work forward, because if you lose somebody, you might lose a whole kind of history. So thank you.
Thank you so much, Katie. Lindsay, I'm going to get to you, but I just wanted to note, because Jeffrey Beatty from DWCC added a comment relevant to this conversation. As a deaf former high school STEM educator, I saw how accessibility is not only about accommodation, it is about whether students can fully participate in learning, labs, group work, safety instructions, and future career pathways. In STEM, delayed or incomplete communication access can affect confidence, learning, leadership development, and opportunity. That's why accessibility leadership must be built into education systems early and not treated as an afterthought. And I couldn't agree more there. Thank you, Jeffrey. Lindsay.
Yes, hi, thank you. I'm coming to you from Ottawa. First of all, what a treat. Thank you so much for this discussion and the panel members. This is just what a treat to be with all these smart and passionate people. So thank you for organizing. Megan, you mentioned that one way to sort of educate leaders is to actually show a physical side by side of what an accessible, for example, bathroom looks like and what an inaccessible one looks like, or an entrance or something like that. I'm wondering how and if this same sort of educational method can be used for neuroinclusion. And so, like, I guess it's how do we make it easier for leaders to sort of redefine what professional looks like, or redefine because people act and communicate differently, and that's great, but there's such a rigid definition of what professional looks like in the workplace. So wondering if Megan or anyone else can help me with that.
Wonderful question. Thank you, Lindsay. Megan?
I love this question. I think it's such an important question, and something I think about regularly as a neurodivergent person in an executive role. I find that this is a conversation I'm regularly meeting and connecting with, because you're right that definition of professionalism, that idea of professionalism, is very rigid in one way. And I think one of the best ways to overcome it is to really walk the talk of inclusion. And so I have these conversations openly. We only use plain language in all of our communications to ensure that communication is targeted and looked at differently. And I think part of having those conversations and modeling what different types of communication can look like, or different types of engagement and professionalism can look like, really helps plant seeds in people's mind that this can look differently. And I think that, we're at a very important time in history where I think we're finally questioning leadership and what we know about leadership, and taking it away from what we've known historically, coming from a white male cishet perspective, we're now including other areas of inclusion, and accessibility is a big component of that. And how can we be more accessible in our understanding of professionalism? So I think really having these conversations is a big component of that. I'll pass it over to any of my other colleagues who want to jump in.
Yeah, Carly or Maureen or Katie.
I just wanted to add really, really quickly, if you don't mind, that as a board member at Accessibility Standards Canada, if you don't see the neurodivergency and you don't see yourself in the standards that are being developed, you have to influence the standard. You have to get, and I'm sorry, I'm being very, like, you have to, I'm telling you what to do, but because it won't work if we set up a standard for employment for neurodiverse, employment for those with intellectual disabilities, those autistics, those in wheelchairs. It's not going to work. It's not going to work if we do that. We have to get it. We have to bring everybody in and be inclusive. So I just wanted to give a little shout out to that.
So powerful. Carly.
I would love to just chime in and say that professionalism is a sham. Why can't we have fun? I'm sorry, maybe it's just the Gen Z or also like the very clear neurodivergence, but it just boggles my mind. Like when everyone acts like robots, you're gonna hate working. Genuinely, it's such a miserable way to live. To act like a robot, you can't have fun. You can't act the way you actually act. I don't understand, but I do. Because the people that are trying to keep us all professional, like you said, white, rich, straight, cisgender, hetero man, who stands to lose the most when we let go of these completely arbitrary standards. And I think neuroinclusivity is so beautiful because it transforms the workplace. It has to inherently, right? Because when neurodivergent people get to show up as their true selves, everyone else will also feel safe to show up as their true selves. It's kind of like a snowball effect or a multiplier effect. But yeah, productivity is a sham. That's it.
Thanks, Carly. Okay, I have another question, and then Jeffrey, I see you've got a couple of comments related to allyship, so we'll come back to that as well. Gifty has asked, if accessibility is a leadership competency rather than solely a compliance obligation, what responsibility do leaders have to examine the colonial and systemic assumptions embedded within their organizations and address the compounded barriers experienced by individuals with intersectional identities? Who would like to address that one?
I can.
Yeah, Katie, go ahead.
I can start thinking about this. I think this is such an important question, but it's one that requires another webinar on its own as a place to start. It certainly requires ongoing thought. Yeah, it's important. And to me, like, just again, within the constraints of the time that we have here together, it's about unlearning. And so there is so much, I think, intersection. And also we live multiply. We live and experience the world multiply. And I think in leadership, it can become really narrow or singular. The dominant understandings and ideas and images of leader are like really narrow. And so we have to start that difficult, messy work of unlearning and undoing, and as part of that, become a little undone. And so really listening with one another, with the people most impacted, as many have said, by policy structures, by systems, and kind of, I think when we begin with that place of harm, we approach it collectively, we can start to perceive the system. We can start to see the system, the pattern. So I'm also somebody who identifies as neurodivergent. The pattern becomes more apparent. And then we can work together to start pulling the threads once we begin to see the patterns. So I think that's all I can say for now, but like absolutely such an important question. And I might use it as a way to link back to the previous question about, what can happen, or, what are some ways of like thinking with neurodivergence and in the workplace. And I think having a buddy, having solidarity and community, but at least one buddy so you can co-regulate when you're doing that difficult work, and maybe become a bit undone as part of that undoing of those structures that harm people and that limit our potential for excellence, flourishing, and innovation.
Well said, Katie. Carly.
Yeah, I know we only have 5 minutes left, but I want to be so clear. There is no true accessibility without anti-racism, without anti-capitalism, and without anti-colonialism. Accessibility or inaccessibility is a system issue, and that system is part of the larger system of white supremacy, colonialism, and patriarchy. And I think that any attempt to do accessibility without systems change, without intersectional and holistic systems change, is a landlord special. You're just painting over the issues. And I think, especially for the disability community, we sometimes feel this pressure to accept these piecemeal changes. But I want to challenge us all to not accept anything less than complete system transformation. Yeah.
Nice. Thank you. Maureen, did you have anything to add, or?
No, I think that you've got the experts here for sure on
All
that
right.
one. Absolutely.
All right. We do only just have a couple of minutes left. So if there are any other questions, feel free to raise your hand virtually or officially, or comment in the chat. I will read two comments that Jeffrey Beatty shared around allyship. Allyship is one of the most important parts of accessibility leadership. DWCC's work over the past 10 years has been built through sustained allyship with disability organizations, consumer groups, technical experts, policy partners, and community leaders. That long-term relationship building, long-term relationship building helped move our work from advocacy into policy, regulatory, and technical systems. Allyship is not only support, it is shared capacity, trust, accountability, and knowing when to hold space so deaf, blind, and hard of hearing leadership can shape the outcome. And he also added in a later comment, allyship is essential. DWCC's work over the past 10 years has grown through sustained allyship with disability organizations. Oh, is that the same? Does it say the same thing? Consumer groups, technical experts, policy partners, community leaders. Yes, so it is the same thing, maybe. To me, allyship means shared capacity, trust, accountability, and making space for those individuals to shape outcomes from the beginning. Apologies there, Jeffrey. I didn't realize there was a duplicate post from that one. And so with that, I think maybe what we'll do is we'll wrap up with just the last couple of minutes. On behalf of the Canadian Accessibility Network and the Accessibility Institute here at Carleton University, thank you to Katie as our moderator for today, to Maureen and to Megan and Carly for these really outstanding, powerful, provocative comments. And I think one of the biggest takeaways for me is something, what we were talking about today isn't rocket science, for lack of an expression. It's very simple. And I think we maybe overthink and make it more complicated than it needs to be. And so I really appreciate that you've given us some different perspectives on leadership as an accessibility competence. And thank you for your time and your commitment to this conversation and to the work that you're all doing in community out there. I want to thank our participants who are still with us here today for joining us and contributing to that conversation as well. And to all of our tech support team and people behind the scenes, our interpreters and our captioners, who are helping us make sure that these forums are a place where everybody can participate and contribute as they're able to and desire to. Thank you, everybody. This is the end of our official forum for right now. We do not have any other ones scheduled at the moment. We're moving into planning time right now. And so we will share our schedule for the upcoming Can Connect forums by the end, probably by the end of June or early July, so we can get them in your calendars. And if there are any burning topics that are of interest to you that you would love to see for a forum, please do feel free to share them in the chat, or if you want to email us at can@carleton.ca, and I'll ask my colleague Aline to put our can information in the chat. Please do reach out. We would love to hear from you and love to hear what you would like to know more about and what kind of conversations are important for us to be having in this forum here today. So thank you once again to everybody, and I wish you all the best. I hope you all have a wonderful summer, and we look forward to seeing you again in the fall when we regroup for our next series of Can Connect forums. Have a wonderful rest of your day.